And hello everyone, welcome back to another nim tutorial. So in this tutorial we'll be taking a look at sequences. If you haven't seen the previous tutorial on arrays, I highly recommend you do, because sequences will build off of the arrays tutorial. Cool, now let's get into creating a few sequences, and they're going to be in var. And you'll see why in a second. Now, unlike with arrays, sequences does not have a set length. So the length of a sequence can change at any point in time. So with an array, you have to go like this, and that's an array. It has to hold 3 values, or it has to hold 5 values, and it has to be of type int. And then, of course, you can add those values, but it can only hold up until 5 values. You cannot add values to an array. So you can't add a 6th value if the length is 5. However, with a sequence, it's different. So let's say we have a list. And this list is a sequence of type string. You'll see we didn't specify any length here. So this, as long as it holds strings, it can be of any length that we require it to be. Same with if we were to go x, and that is a sequence, you'll notice I start with an @ symbol here. Sequences, unlike arrays, start with @ before they start. And let's say 1, 2, 3. Now this will be a sequence of type int. So take note, this, without that, it will be an array. Take a look here, array. But with an @ symbol before the array brackets, we get a sequence. That's a very important distinction to make. And you can also declare a sequence like this. So is equal to new seq int, like that. This will also create a sequence. You hover over it, as you can see, it creates a sequence of type int. How you create a sequence is up to you, as long as you know you need to specify the type. You need to use this @ symbol, and you're good to go. Now, let's configure this list to be, let's say, hobbies. Now here we can say hobbies then becomes a sequence, and let's go anime, coding, and I don't have any other hobbies, I'll say eating. There we go. So now we have a sequence with these 3 values in them, and we can add more later on. We can echo hobbies, and we'll get a sequence, and you'll notice nim also puts an @ symbol here when displaying it, so we know this is a sequence. An array will not have an @ symbol before it. So take note, the @ symbol is important. Even here, if you just did that, then you'll get an error because that's an array, and this is a sequence. Now to add values to the sequence, you can go hobbies.add, I'd say gaming, could be hobby. And now you added a hobby, or you added an item to the sequence. So you'll notice now it's a longer. You can also use delete, so hobbies.delete, and this will delete an item at that given index. So let's say I want to delete coding. That's at index 1, because 0, 1, 2 works just like an array. We run this. Now it's anime, gaming, eating, so there's no coding. And just like I said, it's just like an array. So if I say 1 here, we'll now get gaming. Not coding, because remember we removed coding here, so we'll get gaming. And just like with an array, we can also check if there's an item inside of them. So if eating in hobbies, then echo, we have an eating hobby. So you can still check if this value, and take note it is case sensitive, so this is not the same as this. This is a capital E, this is a lowercase e. They're not the same. Take note, I'm putting a capital case E here. Anyhow, so we have an eating hobby, and we can also add, and we have hobbies.length, or if you prefer, just this, or if you prefer, you can go length hobbies, or if you prefer, you can go length and hobbies. Depends on what you prefer. Again, Nim is incredibly forgiving of how you do things. So depending on what you prefer, you can use. I'm going to use length like this. And you just say -1, other items, other hobbies. There we go. Now if we run this, we have an eating hobby and we have 2 other hobbies. So you'll notice we still have 2 other hobbies other than this. And with this length here, we're getting the length of the hobbies. So the amount of items inside of it. But we're using -1, so we already have eating. And of course, if I were to make this a lowercase e, or if I were to make this a capital case E, if it's any different from this eating here, it will not see it. So we go like this, it will not see it. You'll have to make them both lowercase or uppercase if you don't want anything like that to happen, or you'll just have to do them perfectly like this. Now, sequences on their own are okay, but they're not incredibly powerful just on their own. To make them more powerful, you can import seq-utils, which is sequence utilities. Now let's create a few sequences. A is equal to 10, 20, 30, and you can create a few more. B and C, there you go, 40, 50, 60, and 70. And here let's go 100. And then 1000. Okay, there we go. So now we have 3 sequences. Now let's say you want to make one big sequence from these 3 smaller sequences. Well, then we can go D is equal to concat A, B, C. So now D will be a sequence from one of these. And concat comes from seq-utils. So now if we echo out D, D will contain the values of A, B, and C. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100, 1000. Now here we have E, which is hello. Now E is just a piece of text. We can also have D, and while we're at it, we can go var f is equal to, and you can add a few things to the sequence. Now, some sequence utilities work on more than just sequences. So that is why I declared E. For example, echo e.count. And here we can count all of the L's inside of E. And of course, this should be of a char type, not a string type. There we go. So we need to use single quotes, not double quotes. Now, if we were to run this, we'll get 2 because there are 2 L's inside of E. Similarly, we can also do it with sequences. Now, just for fun's sake, I'm going to, instead of saying d.count, I'm just going to say count d. And instead of saying L, because this is an integer, we can say count all of the 7s inside of this sequence. If we run it, we'll get 4 7s. So this same function comes from seq-utils, but it works on both sequences and strings. Same with, let's say, we go e.minIndex. We can do the same for f as an example. If we run this, we'll get 1 and we'll get 11. And it will return the index of the smallest value. Now with strings, it works with ASCII. So in this case, the ASCII value of E is less than the ASCII value of H. If you don't know what ASCII is, it's not that important for right now. But basically, whenever you convert a letter to a character that computers can understand, because as you know, computers work with numbers. There's this intermediate level. So we have E, then we have ASCII characters, and then it goes to binary. The ASCII characters are basically numbers such as, I believe, 65 is like a capital or lowercase a. However, my ASCII is very outdated, so I'm not sure if that's correct. But anyways, it will return the index of the smallest value in the array, or sequence, or string. In this case, 1 is at index 11. So if we were to say echo if, and we did this, then now if we run this, we'll get 1, because 1 is the value here, the smallest index. And of course, you can flip it. Instead of min, you can say max. It will get the the largest values index. So now if we run it, we'll get 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 is the largest value inside of the sequence. You also have functions such as f.deduplicate, and it'll remove all duplicates from a sequence. So if we run this, then here we'll get the same sequence but now without duplicates. So here we had like a bunch of 7s. We had 1, 2, 3 extra 7s. Now we only have 1 7 here. So remove all of the extra duplicates. We also have filter. Now this is a little bit more complex. It uses a procedure or a function, and then whatever is returned, but we'll get to that later. So basically you just say proc, then you can go, this can be any value here. So that this is just a variable, and you can specify the type if you want. In this case, it's going to be an int. I'll explain why in a second. And it will return a boolean, and we can say x less than 5. Now if we run this, and I'll explain it in a second, we get this. So what happened is we said, okay, for each value, and each value here is like an x. So 5 becomes x, and then we do this comparison. 6 becomes x, and we do this comparison. 7 becomes x, and we do this comparison. So for each item inside of f, check if that item is less than 5. If it is, return it. If it is not less than 5, remove it. So by doing this, we removed all the values that are greater than 5. This includes 5 as well, because 5 is not less than 5, like we specify here. If we were to say less or equal to, 5 would also be included here, as you can see. So this filter method here basically says for each item, which is x, that's why it's an integer. If this was instead a sequence of strings, you'll have to do strings here. Then we're going to return a true or false value. Then we check, is this value less or equal to 5? If it is less or equal to 5, return it. If it's not, don't return it. We also have a bunch of others like keep if, do the same, and let's just run this. And take note that keep if will permanently change f. So you can't just echo it out, but it will permanently change this f here. Anyhow, so if we run this, then here we get the same answer. However, it's the same as filter. It just permanently changes f. That's very important to take note of. It permanently changes f. Unlike filter, which will not change f, it will just return a new sequence from it. So this will permanently modify it. Filter will return a sequence, a new sequence. So if will never change. So you see here, we're actually getting an error because it returns a new sequence. It does not modify an existing one, like keep if. Cool. Then you also have, and we just echo here, map. So f.map, and here we can just say x, and it's just going to return an int. I'll explain this in a second. There we go. So what map does, it says, it's the same as filter with like, this value becomes x for each time it goes and does something, but this time it just returns the same value. Now the thing here is, let's say we wanted to multiply everything inside of this sequence with 2. We can say times 2. Now if we run it, we'll get 10, 12, 14, 14, 16. So for each item inside of this sequence, take that item and multiply it by 2. And take note, if you're having trouble understanding filter, keep if, and map, it's perfectly fine. A lot of people, when they first get introduced to these types of functions, they don't quite understand it. So if you're having trouble with them, then it's perfectly fine. You do not have to be perfect with them yet. Let's quickly go back to deduplicate. So deduplicate. So this removes all of the duplicates. But let's just change this to D for now. And I'll explain why we did that in a second. So now we get this. Now, if the sequence is sorted, so if it's already sorted, you can pass in true. In this case, it is already sorted. The lowest value is here, and the highest value is here. So it's at the end, and the lowest value is at the start. It's sorted in the middle. So everything here is sorted already. Unlike here, where 5 is here, then 1 is here near the end. Like this is already sorted. If it's already sorted, and we can run this, then there's no difference. However, if you pass in true here, that means that this D value is already sorted. And it will use a faster method. So if you're working with code that really relies on speed, and you have a sequence that is already sorted, then you can do this and get a faster deduplication in the process. But take note, if you were to try and do this with if, which is not already sorted, it's not going to be able to do the filtering correctly because it's not already sorted. So if it's not already sorted, just use normal deduplicate. It is going to be a little bit slower, but unless you're really working with like you need intense performance right now, like really good performance, and it is already sorted, then you can do that and it will be a bit faster. You can also do something cool, such as, let's go back to D just so we have it. You can also do something such as distribute, and if we say 3, then it will convert the sequence into 3 other sequences. So it will distribute the amount between 3 other sequences. But take note, it's also inside of one big sequence. So if we were to say 0 here, we'll get this first sequence of 1, 1, 2, 3. You can see there. And if we were to say 2, then let's go 3, then we'll get 3. If we go 1, we'll get 1. If we get 0, we'll get 1, whatnot. So it will return you a nested or a multi-dimensional sequence. Now let's say you have another sequence. Let's Z, and that is my code works. And you really want to convey to your coworker that your code is not broken. It works better than anyone else's code in the whole company. Then you can just say dot cycle, let's say 5. Now if you run this, it will repeat it 5 times. It will return a sequence of those values repeated 5 times. Similarly, you can also go and you can create a string, and we can just say repeat my code works, and now do 5. And that will return a sequence with my code works in it 5 times. Next up, let's say we have if here, and we want to insert a value between these first 2 values, so 5 and 6. Then what we can do is we can say if.insert, and we can put 999 just so we can really see it, into index 1. Now if we were to run this, then here you'll see we get 5, 6, and you'll get 5, 9, 9, 9, 6. So we can use insert to insert new values into a specific location or into a specific index inside of a sequence. Nice. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's say we have let h, which is equal to a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I, which is a sequence of at hello Tom exclamation mark. And then J. J is a zip with H and I. This will combine the 2 sequences, creating a new one. Very similar to concat. However, it can also be unzipped. So let's go here and say, oh, where's my things? Echo J, right? So let's echo J. So we get this. Now it gives you a tuple, and we'll get to tuples later, but it gives you basically these values. So 1 will go to hello, 2 will go to Tom, and 3 go to this exclamation mark. So we're basically saying each one of these should be aligned to a value here. If this one is shorter than this one, then ignore the rest. Or if this one is longer than this one, then ignore the rest in here. Basically, it will make one in a new sequence of the one that has a shorter length and assign values to them. Now the neat part here is we can say j echo j.unzip. Now if we use j.unzip and we run this, then we get a tuple, and we'll get into what a tuple is later, with the two sequences. So it's not the full sequence in this case with this top one here, just because this one here was too short to contain all of the values inside of this top one. But the neat part is you can combine the two, and then we'll be smart enough to like assign values to each. So this 1 will be with hello, 2 will be with Tom, 3 will be with the exclamation mark. And then when you unzip it, it will just create a new sequence or sequences with the values that it had in that zip. And that's that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next nim tutorial.